Are you playing to win or just running out the clock? In sports, the game clock drives every decision. It creates urgency, sharpens focus, and pushes players to perform their best. So what if you treated your life with that same sense of urgency? I've created an exercise to help you do just that. It's called Your Game Clock. Download Your Game Clock today at bill-burke.net/clock. It's free, it's simple, yet transformative, and it could be the first step towards achieving peak performance in the areas of your life that matter the most. Remember, life isn't a practice run. Every second counts, and your time is now. Welcome to the show. This is another edition, another episode of the Fortitude Forum, and I am really fired up to have my next guest with me today. He's a orthopedic surgeon. We met a few years back, and he's got a really interesting background and a really interesting perspective on success, what it takes to get there. And I love the idea of not just being one thing or identifying yourself as that one thing. He's got multiple interests. He's always in the pursuit of learning new things. So it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Dr. Kyle Stevenson. Doc, how are you?
Good. How you doing, sir? Thanks for having me on, Bill. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome. I'm glad you can make time. I know you got the scrubs on. I can't wait to ask you about your time in the operating room and how that all fits to the theme of this show and the lessons that can be gleaned and learned by the listeners from each and every one of our guests. Let's jump into it. I wanted to ask you first, what inspired you initially to pursue a career in surgery, and what role did mental toughness actually play in getting through the grind and the training and the medical school and the residency? And a lot of people wouldn't even make the decision to go down that path just because of all the hard work and the time that would need to be invested. So what was the inspiration for you?
Yeah. So growing up, similar to you, I played sports, baseball, football, basketball, pretty much playing sports all year round, all the time. I was obsessed. The Chicago Cubs were my team. I My goal in life was, and I wrote this down, my goal in life was to be the shortstop for the Chicago Cubs or the team doctor for the Chicago Cubs. So I made too many errors at shortstop to be the shortstop for the Chicago Cubs. So I figured being a team doctor is not a bad second choice there. So I knew since I was a young kid, science was my background. I knew that I was going to be a doctor at some point, and the only doctor I wanted to be was a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon, and here I am. So
Were your parents in medicine? Did you have influences in your environment that caused you to have those dreams?
good question. No, neither one of my parents. My dad was a successful businessman for a long time, entrepreneur, excuse me, and very successful. And he always joked that the closest thing he got to a 4.0 was blood alcohol level. Anytime he would introduce me to his friends, he would say that. And I have three older siblings, all smart, did very well for themselves, but mostly in business. And so I was the one that came up fourth in line. I just knew I was going to be a doctor. I would see doctors in the community, and I just had mad respect for them. Anytime I got injured in sports, like going and talk to the doctor, I was just picking his brain on the anatomy and what he saw and this, that, and the other. And even my parents saw it from an early age. Like that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I put my mind to since I was young.
What a gift to be able to know early on as a kid what you wanted to do and have a passion for something. That is so awesome. I think that eliminates a lot of gray area, a lot of self-torture, I think, that some people go through just trying to figure out what they're meant to do and what they're called to do and what they feel good about. That's awesome that you knew from a very early age. And I think knowing that really is part of the reason that you were able to go through all the hoops to get to where you are now. So talk me through and walk me through what it actually takes to get through medical school and residency and actually become a practicing physician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First thing I'll say is every book I read now, I read a ton of books now, more now than I ever did. And every single book that teaches you about, the how to be wealthy or how to be the best version of yourself, every first chapter starts with mindset. That's where everything starts, is mindset. Before you can do anything else, you better get your own mind right, and you better have that why that's going to drive you for your future. And not realizing it, but I had my why. I knew what I was going to be in the future. I knew that I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. That was always my why. And crazy enough, every decision I made was getting me to that next step. Now, there was definitely challenges along the way. And I could tell you a big challenge. And again, similar to you, like you were probably successful in sports, and anything you did, you probably did well, right? And that's kind of how I was in grade school, high school, succeeded in sports, always did well academically, went to college on a full ride scholarship, played baseball and football, a Division II school here in Indianapolis. And it was great. I knew, hey, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go to the next step, and then go to medical school, and then I played football, baseball. I got good grades in college. I was successful. I interviewed for medical school and was going to go to IU and just live here in Indy and live my life as a local physician. And I didn't get into medical school, and so I was like completely bummed because everybody knew that's what I was going to be doing. And so then I had to do this 1 year of a master's program, and it's basically a bunch of rejects that didn't get into medical school, all did the same program. And I got the highest score in that class. But they told me during medical school interviews the first time around, you need to get a better score on your MCAT and we'll let you go. And so I never took the MCAT again because I knew my score was good enough. I felt like it was good enough. So went to this master's program, did well, got the highest grade in the class, went back to this interview at IU, and they were like, you didn't retake the MCAT, so you're still not in. They waitlisted me. But in the meantime, I learned about DO schools, osteopathic schools, applied to more schools in a little variety, and ended up getting into an osteopathic school down in Bradenton, Florida. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So it went from basically the worst thing. That 1 year was rough because I was like, is this dream going to become a reality? All these people are like, what are you doing? I thought you were going to be in medical school. Like, you're taking classes at IUPUI downtown. What's going on? And so I basically had a chip on my shoulder since that time. So I got into DO school, didn't get into IU, went down to medical school, and there's basically DO board exams you have to take, and there's MD board exams you take. And they're split, and they're not the exact same test. Same information, just not the same test. So as a DO, we take this, it's called a COMLEX. Well, because I had a chip on my shoulder, I was a little pissed off that I didn't get in. I took both the USMLE and the COMLEX and got 99th percentile in both because I was just PO'd. Like, come on, I know I'm good enough. And that really just drove me to succeed. And I had the best time in medical school down in Florida. That's where I really thrived and took off. And like I said, number one in my medical school class, loved it, got into the residency program at Michigan State that I wanted to be in, and have been, I think, succeeding since then. But sometimes it takes that little adversity. The quote I love is adversity makes some men break. It makes others break records.
That's amazing, man. I love that. I don't think I've heard that one before, but I'm going to write that one down and use it in the future. Tell me a little bit more. Go a little deeper on that moment where you didn't get in the first time. Did you go through self-doubt? What were your feelings, especially as people started coming up to you and asking you those questions like, what's going on? How come your dream isn't following the plan that you've all laid out for us? What was that like? What did that feel like?
Yeah, good question. It definitely felt rough. It was self-doubt, no question. I still knew in the back of my mind that this is my why. I still am going to figure out a way to get there. But yeah, I mean, that summer, I remember having a good time. Classes weren't as hard as I was thinking they would be. And I was like, I don't know. I felt like I was living almost almost coasting for that year. Like, I wasn't grinding by any means. I felt like I was coasting, and it just didn't feel like myself. I was like, I'm used to thriving and pushing towards my goal, playing 2 sports in college, all these things. And that year just didn't feel the same. And yeah, there was a lot of self-doubt, no question. But when I had a girlfriend at the time, and it was almost like, oh, you guys should probably get engaged and live that life and stay in Indiana. And it almost felt like living an average life, which is not what I wanted. So when I went to medical school in Florida, I just thrived. It was like probably a combination of me getting out of Indiana, which is where I'm from, born and raised. Literally after high school, wanted to go as far away as possible. I was going to play football at Yale, going to play baseball at Purdue or Dayton, and I ended up playing sports 20 minutes from my parents' house. So I was like, I think I need a change of scenery to really just put me on a trajectory to push myself and succeed. And that's what going to medical school down in Florida really did for me.
You mentioned a couple of things there that I want to go back to. You mentioned your why, and you've mentioned that a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just, do you think that your why was just to become a doctor, fulfill what that goal was for you? Or do you think Was there something a little deeper, something a little beyond that about fill in the blank? You tell me.
Yep.
Was it wanting to help people? Was it wanting to have a certain status? Was there anything else? Have you ever given that any type of thought?
Yep. I give it a thought quite a bit. Yeah. As a physician, I wanted to be a physician, well respected in the community. Obviously, make some good money. That's a big part of it. If we didn't want to make money, like I could go on a mission trip somewhere. But yeah, so be significant in the community, not just successful, but significant. Make an impact in your community. I always wanted to be team doc, and I felt like being a team doc for the local high school was awesome. Everybody coming to you and relying on you. So that was a big part of it. Yeah, I think significance, control over your life, making an impact, contributing in a large way, all those things. And yeah, to this day, I still think about that. Success is Keith Cunningham quote that I always come back to. And I'm going to look it up real quick just because it's in my phone and I don't want to stumble on it. But success is about getting what you want. Fulfillment is about giving what you got. And my parents growing up, I should say this, they were the most giving, generous people I've ever met in my life, always giving back. And so I think there was that altruistic mindset of wanting to just give, make an impact.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm right there with you. And I heard you say something else a little bit ago. You talked about not wanting to live an average life. And I think that kind of connects with what you just described. There's one of the reasons I created this show was to talk about what's required to reach peak performance and to not live an average life. However you define that, however you define what success is, and that can be in your relationships or your business or whatever. It could be in sports. So to me, the core ingredient in not living that average life and chasing the best version of you is mental toughness. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that surgeons are got to be one of the most mentally tough professions out there
Mm-hmm.
because they face high stakes pressure almost daily in an unbelievably unique environment. So, talk to me a little bit. Take me inside the mind of a surgeon. How do you maintain focus and composure when someone's health might be on the line, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even someone's life is actually on the line?
Yep. Great question. I definitely have the analogy of sports. There's no growing up, and that's all I did. So I always thought that this is very similar to sports. I still go into surgery with butterflies in my stomach. I still over prepare for surgery. Mental toughness is one of the biggest parts to be a surgeon because you literally do have people's lives in your hand. There's no question there.
Hmm.
People are always nervous when you talk to them prior to surgery, and you have to be that boat of confidence to say, "Hey, I got you. I'm your surgeon, and I will take good care of you." Never say never on medicine, and never say always. But I definitely think the analogy of sports is a good one, to where you um, visualize, have clarity of what you want is going to happen. Have a short term memory to a degree. That's a tough one because you don't just want to forget something bad that happened. You want to learn from it and learn, hey, that happened. What can we do to change it and get better next time? That's part of growing. And now I'm 6 years into practice and I'm doing cases now that I was scared out of my wits to do 5, 6 years ago. But you grow and get better just like anything else. So yeah, a lot of it is, dealing with adversity. It's being confident. It's over preparing. It is still visualizing. Even before I go to bed at night, I'm visualizing what I'm doing the next day for cases so that you have your plan A, plan B, and plan C, because a lot of times your plan C is what you're going to need.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love the idea that you're visualizing exactly how you want the operation the next day to play out in your mind. I think that's so important. And I think it's such an underestimated part of peak performance in any industry. It's certainly not something that I did. I did a little bit, but not as much as I probably should have as an athlete. But it can be so powerful when your subconscious is taking notes and recording exactly the ideal scenario. But
Mhm.
on the other end of that, like you said, sometimes adversity is inevitable. So, how do you actually handle those setbacks in the operating room? I know you're expecting something to go off
Mhm.
track at some point. How do you have a process in place for handling those setbacks when you're under such pressure?
It's tough. I mean, you definitely have to be calm in the face of a setback, because when you're not, everybody else feels it, and then you got people scrambling. I would say, I mean, the, today was a flawless day. We had 3 great cases, and things were perfect. Like I didn't have any issues. But I would say it's pretty common for things not to go perfect. And if you are not cool, calm, collected, if you are not the one that everybody's looking to say, hey, how do we get out of this? Then it's going to be a disaster and you won't be able to sleep for weeks or months. So the way I think about it is everybody's relying on me to get out of this situation. Are there times where you may need to rely on a colleague? I've done that before. Where middle of a case, I've had the nurse take a little video of a scope I'm doing and say, "Hey, text this out to these 5 guys who I trust, they're mentors, and get their feedback." And a lot of times that can help a situation if you're just on the fence about something. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to be cool, calm, collected. You have to take care of the situation. You know, the other part of surgery that's a little nerve wracking is you're on a bit of a time crunch. You can't just sit there for 6 hours and do this surgery and figure it out. Like, go look it up in an anatomy book. I mean, a lot of times you're under like a tourniquet, or there's traction if you're doing a hip scope or something like that. There's a time crunch, so you better be efficient and you better make decisions quick. You can't be hem hauling too much. Like you got to go off your experience, go off your gut, go off what you know and what you've learned.
You're talking, and I'm visualizing myself standing in that operating room, and there's so many parallels to my background as a quarterback in college. I'm thinking of the play clock that's winding down. You don't want to get the flag thrown on you. You got to maintain that calm presence because everybody's looking at you. It's really eerie how closely related the two things are. Of course,
Mhm.
I didn't have anybody's life in my hands on the football field.
A
It's
lot of
really
people relying on you, right? The whole stadium's full. There's cameras. People are like diehard Michigan State fans, and their Saturday is going to be ruined if
I
make
was
that
just going to
play.
say
So
that. I don't know whether they were relying on me, but it really is fascinating to think about 100,000 people. I get to determine whether or not they walk out of the stadium in a good mood or a bad mood
mhm,
and have their weekend ruined. I didn't look at it at the time like that, but it definitely had a profound effect on a lot of people. But I want to shift gears just a little bit with
mhm,
you because I think the other part of your story is really fascinating as well. You've got this interest and this profession now that you're really developing in your own life, and that's real estate investing. And
mhm.
it's not something that you hear a lot about of surgeons and doctors as something that they talk about openly. I'm sure there are real estate investors in the healthcare profession, but I really wanted to just hear your story and your background on that. What drew you into real estate investing in the first place? And really relate that or compare that to the profession of being a surgeon and how mental toughness has to come into play with that. Because I would imagine, being that it has some sort of speculative nature to it, there's adversity that inevitably pops up in the real estate deals as well. So
Yep.
talk to me a little bit about how you got into it in the first place.
Yeah, good question. So this was post COVID, basically. I was doing real estate investing as a limited partner. So I was my financial advisor. I was giving him money to invest in stocks or in real estate deals. And I was like, yeah, let's do real estate deals. That sounds great. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was just handing him my money, 50,000, 100,000. He'd put me into some deals and I didn't really know much about it. And I would say the biggest mindset shift occurred when I graduated residency or fellowship in 2018. COVID hits. I am at this place where I'm feeling stuck big time. I was feeling like basically the problem is I dreamt my entire life I wanted to be a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon. I wanted to work with professional teams. I got to work with the Boston Celtics in 2018. And then so I hit all my dreams and I think that was the problem. I was like, okay, I'm at the precipice. This is the dream. I hit it. Now what? And that's COVID. And I was just feeling really stuck. And my wife could tell you I was coming home and I just was not like that excited. I was making good money. I was taking care of patients that I wanted to take care of, but I realized significance. Yeah, you're significant. Your patients are appreciative of you taking care of them. Control, definitely control was going by the wayside more and more in medicine. And I think with COVID, I realized how little control I actually had. I didn't always trust what the government, their decisions when it came to COVID. The hospitals had more control of what we did. Um, During COVID, orthopedic surgeons were basically told to stay home because we didn't serve much purpose. And so they wouldn't let us do elective cases. So control was out of the question. What else? I mean, basically, burnout was setting in and I didn't realize it, but 63% of doctors are burnt out right now, which is kind of crazy to hear. And so I think I just hit that point. I was like, we need to change. And so my wife and I decided to move to Charleston, South Carolina. I went to medical school in Florida, loved it. I wish I would have, lived there for longer. So we got up. We had our first son during COVID or December 2020. We decided let's shift gears. We moved to Charleston, South Carolina. I took a sports job down there. And I was like, all right, we're gonna be by the beach. I'm still gonna work, but got down there and realized that it's still the same job. It's still a job. I was working and things were good, but I just felt like there was something more I could be doing. The other aspect of that is I didn't trust the government's decisions on what they were doing with COVID. I had no control over that. The only thing I knew how to control was how do I lower my taxes? And so instead of paying the government all these taxes, then they send them over to Ukraine or send them here for COVID relief, whatever. I just want to minimize my taxes. Call my CPA up and he's like, sorry, there's nothing you can do. You make too much money. So on that break from Indianapolis to Charleston, I had time to read more and I started reading more, diving into real estate books. I've always been a Robert Kiyosaki fan, always knew it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. And so my goal is keep as much money as I can, minimize my taxes. Real estate's the best way to do it. I was Charleston was too expensive, so I went back to my roots in Indianapolis, Indiana, bought a $75,000 property in 2022, renovated it, put a renter in there, refinanced it, pulled most of my money out, and I still have it today. And that was the first experience in real estate investing that really was like, this is fun. I think I could do this. Fast forward, we're 2.5 years in, and I have 6 of my own units. And then I'm co-GP, co-general partner on a 176 unit apartment complex, 2 hotels down in Louisiana. And I'm raising right now for a development here in Westfield, Indiana. So I'm loving real estate investing. It is definitely lowered my taxes, which is awesome. But it's also like giving me a creative outlet. So when I'm in the OR and working with the patients, like that's great. But I can also talk to them more about what's going on outside of medicine. And it's just making me happier and a better surgeon all around because I have other passive income coming in. I don't feel like I'm a slave to my job. And that burnout has really gone away because of all that.
That's amazing. You hear about people needing to exercise more, take walks, or to get a dog or whatever it is to have more balance from their professional life. But you basically gave yourself not another job, but another career, let's say, to balance out the first one. And you might think, or one might think that because you've got so many time constraints with being a surgeon that there's not enough time to really dive in and learn something brand new. But talk to me about what that's been like. And is that a myth? You've proven that you can, but how do you take on this other endeavor while still maintaining all the other parts of your life and performing those parts at such a high level?
Yep. I think honestly, this mentality, and I'm trying to help push this mentality on to other physicians because through my podcast and through educating and webinars and stuff. But this mentality is, I think, the new physician. 63% of physicians are burnt out, right? And that's because they're thinking that old way. All the physicians that are retiring, they made money hand over fist. They could go on vacations. They could do all these cool things. Right now, physicians are feeling stuck because income is going down for physicians. Interest rates are really high and it's expensive to buy a house. It's expensive to do all these things you thought you could do. Most physicians are feeling very like middle class. And I'm not trying to say there's anything bad with that, but I'm trying to get physicians to think more like the wealthy. And how do we do that? It is, of course, educating yourself, read books. You can get ahead of 90% of people if you read books. Honestly, it's not that hard. Being into stuff and prepare for the day in orthopedics. And then when I get home from orthopedics, I could do real estate stuff. I set my schedule to where I'm either doing real estate, working on my job as an orthopedic surgeon, or hanging out with my kids. But when I'm doing those things, I'm putting the phone down. I'm literally intentional with that. Or I'm going on dates with my wife. That's another thing that I've said.
You got to make sure you do that.
Yes, we're doing that football on Saturdays anymore, like we used to do. Now, if there's a big game and I want to watch it, I know I'm going to watch it, and so I planned it out in my schedule. But self-discipline is self-respect. There's no question. Being disciplined in your schedule makes my wife happier. It makes my kids happy. I'm happy. I'm spending twice as much time with my kids and half as much money, and that's what they want, right? Yeah, it's just being intentional with your life and knowing what you want. I should flip that and say it's knowing what you want. It's vision. What's your why? What's your vision for that? Getting clarity in your own mind. Okay, what do I really want and how do I want to get it? And then putting a plan in place. Execute the plan.
Yeah, it's simple. The formula is simple. I'm not going to say it's easy, but as the formula on paper is certainly simple. It doesn't have to be
Correct.
overly complicated. So, given these two very different professions, surgery and real estate, decision making is still a commonality between the two of them, and
Yep.
decision making under uncertain circumstances. So, how do you assess risk, and how do the two compare in terms of taking decisive action in both of those fields?
It's funny. I try to educate physicians on real estate investing, but the more I try to educate, the more I realize that we are the most risk averse population, which is not a bad thing, right? Physicians don't
Yeah.
like to just hand their money over and say, here, I should invest in this. But I think because of our trade, we're risk averse, right? Like we understand numbers and all right, if I do the procedure this way, like this minimizes any risk and there's going to be a 98% chance of success. And that's what you want to do, right? You want to minimize all risk as a surgeon or a physician. And so it makes sense and it carries over financially a lot of times. But yeah, so for me, knowledge is power, of course, reading a lot and then connecting, probably networking and educating are the two biggest things that you can do to learn more about real estate investing. It's very comparable to, again, sports, orthopedics. I'm just gonna stick to orthopedics because that's what I know. Sports, orthopedics, and real estate investing all rely on a team to succeed. You can't do it by yourself. There's no question. And so in real estate investing, I have teams. Like I networked enough to where I have a good team in place to help me with these properties, and I got a team to help me with this property, and my single family homes. I got a team to help me out. So you're relying on a lot of people, and and you're helping each other out. Um, what else was I going to say about that? Another thing I was going to say about reading. I love this quote too. Jim Rohn, who's a big time entrepreneur, like the pre Tony Robbins. He
Oh
says,
yeah.
um, formal education will make you a living. Self education will make you a fortune. There you go.
Yes.
Yep.
I have heard that one, and I totally agree with that. The bulk and the most important things that I've learned have been from me just taking action and seeking out knowledge through books and podcasts. And so you're absolutely right, because you can be intentional with that as well. You can learn exactly what you're looking to learn. And for you, it was real estate investing. So you went down that path and obviously have been very successful. One of the things that I want to make sure the listeners are pulling from what you're saying is the fact that you, in all of your endeavors, have had to put aside your ego to build those teams and to look for
Mhm.
answers when you yourself don't have them. You're in the operating room, you don't know how to move forward, so you're texting other surgeons their advice for you. You're seeking out teams and people to help you with the things that maybe you're not the strongest at. So
Yep.
I think to be successful and to reach your highest level of performance in whatever you're doing, putting aside your ego at some point, you got to have confidence in yourself, of course, but you've got to put that ego aside in order to be able to get to where you want to go. Just very
True.
impressive what you've done, Kyle, in both situations, in both professions. So I just want to say thanks for being here, and thanks for imparting all this wisdom, and thanks for bringing to light the idea that we all have agency in our lives. We don't have to stay in this one lane if we
Hmm.
don't want to. It doesn't mean we got to jump out of that lane, but we can stay there and build a parallel lane at the same time.
Absolutely.
So let the listeners know how they can connect with you. You mentioned your podcast. Tell them where they can listen to that to get much more knowledge on some of the mindset things that we're talking about, but of course, real estate investing as well.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Assets and Orthopedics Podcast. You can find it on YouTube or anywhere you find podcasts. Um, and then you can find me on Instagram at Kyle Stevenson on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I am on Facebook. Hit me up. I've learned that if you want to do well in life and feel fulfilled and all that, it's giving away stuff for free is the way to go. Like I'm not trying to make money off people, and I can educate on real estate investing. If you want to invest in the deals we have, great, but I'm not going to charge you to reach out to me. I want people to get my cell phone, text me, call me, reach out on social media and just ask questions, especially people that aren't familiar with real estate investing. People always have questions like, I don't know, I feel too dumb to ask. Just text me and reach out, and we could chat about it.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate you being here. Let's keep in touch, and best of luck going forward with the podcast, the real estate investing, and of course, all the great people and lives that you're impacting through surgeries. Thanks, Kyle.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.